Welcome to Westonka Memories. The Westonka Historical Society is delighted to be hosting some interviews with local folk to preserve local history in our archives. Today we have Marvin Johnson, willing to tell us a little about his family history. Morning, Marvin.
Good morning, Dr. Myers.
Good to have you here. I'm delighted to talk with you again, this time not about school, but about some family history. Thank you for your willingness to share your family history with us.
Well, this is probably a good thing to have happen because even with family members, oftentimes we don't talk enough about the history. And in trying to reminisce, and just thinking about this, I thought, there are several questions I should have asked my mother and dad over the years about this or that I don't have an answer for. And and nobody can answer them for me now. So something like this probably is always good to have little snippets.
Thank you. So tell me about where you live and how long you've lived there.
Well, that's an interesting question because where I live, our family has lived since 1864. And
wow.
So we're original settlers on the place, although my great-grandfather did not homestead the farm, but he came from Sweden originally and lived was in New York and Boston, and then moved to Rockford, Illinois. And when he was in Rockford, Illinois, he decided to, where he was working, somebody had some land here in Minnesota. And he began conversation with him and decided to trade his house and lot with some cash, we don't know how much, for the 160 acres, which this landowner had never seen, but did not want to go up and look at it or anything. He came up here sight unseen and brought his family, and this has been home since 1864. And so I haven't, it's been my grandfather and grandmother, and then of course my folks, and then I've been living on the home place ever since, since birth actually, except when I was in college and in the service. And it's on County Road 6, just north of Mound. So very accessible to and our property drains basically into the Lake Minnetonka area.
Wonderful. So in your earliest memories, what was it like living in this house?
Well, the house, the basic house was a wood frame, of course, a wood frame house that my great-grandfather built that was not finished upstairs. We had one bedroom upstairs, and when I was a kid, I remember that bedroom was used by a young man that my mother and dad had living with them, who came from Big Brothers. He had lost his folks, and so that bedroom upstairs was his until he was drafted into the military in World War II. And then when he left, then my folks improved the upstairs of the house, so we added 3 bedrooms upstairs, and but the house was comfortable. We had wooden, of course, we burned wood or coal, and then later oil in stoves that were sitting in the house. And then when I was in high school, my mother and dad decided to remodel or put a full basement under the house. And then we put in, of course, a forced air furnace. And of course, in the meantime, after when I was growing up, we first ended up with electricity. Then we ended up with running water in the house because none of that was available when I was a kid. So the house has been very comfortable over the years. And in the meantime, when they put the basement in, they added a little section of the house 2 different directions. So the house now is there's 5 bedrooms and a bathroom on every floor, and it's old, but it's comfortable.
Super. As I recall, as a kid, you might also have had a teacher staying with you. Is that true?
We did. And when I was in first grade, and that's one of the questions that I thought afterwards I should have asked my mother more about. But she was at that point in time they had added the bedrooms upstairs in the house, and so she had the only bedroom that was on the first floor of the house. And I don't, I was in first grade when she came. Her name was Florence Sutton. She grew up on a farm in Western Independence, and of course, she did not have a car. And so on Monday morning, her family, or I think most of the time it was her sister June, who that brought her to the school, which was Armstrong School, just south of the cemetery on County Road 90 in Independence. Brought her to school on Monday morning, and then she would live with us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then Friday night her sister would come and pick her up again, and they'd go to the grocery store at Maple Plain, and usually I went with them, but I don't remember of her eating meals with us as a family, which is strange because I'm sure she must have. But she probably spent more time in her room in preparation. But yes, for the whole year, she lived with our family as well. So that was kind of unique. Her sister June just celebrated her 105th birthday on the 14th of June.
Wow.
Yeah.
Terrific. So this was 160 acres. Did you farm?
I farmed all my life, except that when, of course, when I'm in college, I came home on weekends, and then when I was in the service, yeah, all of the family was expected to work on the farm when we were here. So, yeah, we milked cows on the farm until 1986. Had a lot of pigs. Never had turkeys, but we did have chickens. But we all had. As we were growing up, family members, we all had Pacific chores that we had to do. I remember I have two sisters, one that's 13 months younger than I am, one that's another 2 years younger. But we had to trade off to begin with, where one of us would go out and carry the milk from the cows to the milk house, so my dad didn't have to carry the milk. And then the other times we had to help in the house washing the dishes and so forth. But then, of course, as I got a little bit older, then that was more my responsibility to be out in the barn with my dad or do whatever chores he had for me to do. So that was part of living on a family farm.
For sure. If you think about those memories in your youth, was there a particularly happy memory that you recall?
Well, I was trying to think of what probably was our most exciting events. Now we had my dad had, and this would be interesting for anybody that lived lives in the Mound area. My dad had a first cousin who was Florence Carlson, and her husband, she was Florence Moline was her maiden name, but she married Harold Carlson, who was the minister who started St. John's Lutheran Church in Mound. And my Florence and my dad were very close, and we had a lot of different family events. I remember those as a kid, where Florence liked to entertain a lot, and of course Harold was very gracious and everything. So we had many different family events over at in the lower level at the St. John's Lutheran Church, which is now the Mound Evangelical Free Church, before of course the big addition and all that kind of stuff. And then other family events that we always seem to look forward to. People weren't as busy with meetings in those days as they are today. So I think you had more time to get together as a family. And one of the things I remember in particular, when Florence Florence and Harold would come to our farm, she loved to get into a water fight with my dad. So they had more water fights than anybody I ever knew. But you know, it was all in fun, and so a lot of the family events, yeah, were, you know, very precious as a younger person.
Mhm. Terrific. So if you think about when you were young, maybe into high school, what did you think that you wanted to do for a living? What did you wanted to do when you grew up? Did you
Well,
want to be a farmer?
no, it was interesting. I that was kind of not. I wasn't thinking really of that, but I thought it would be fun to be a banker
Ah,
and finance, and I was good math, bookkeeping, and that kind of stuff. I was good. I did well in school on that, and so anytime there was, I remember in high school when they had career days and so forth, I usually went to a path where it had something to do with finance,
mm,
and it didn't. But as it turned out, I ended up getting a scholarship to the University of Minnesota School of Agriculture, and kind of took general agriculture courses. And then not too long after graduation from that, I was elected onto the Federal Land Bank Board. And I thought, well, this is interesting. Here I like finance, and now I get elected to a board that is dealing with farm finances, and that's about as close as I ever got to, you know, other than organizations now and with the city, you know, dealing with budgets and stuff all the time. That I've been involved in financing enough that I guess it settled my desire from a childhood, and I was very content to be on the farm and continue there all my life.
super.
One of the things I want to mention too that was a real delight as a youngster. Before we had 4-H started in the area, and of course I went to the one-room frame schoolhouse at Armstrong, and that's where the 4-H club met. And one of our neighbor ladies became the 4-H leader in it, and that was, you know, that was a 4-H was a big thing, and really helped to develop the character and responsibility and so forth in different phases of a person's life. And you know, we would do one act plays. We'd do demonstrations at 4-H meeting. We would sing and so forth. And we met at the country school most of the time until later on when the school was closed, then we met in homes. But 4-H was a big thing in the lives of you know, young people around the area. So. And my 4-H club was called the Armstrong 4-H Club, which was the same name as the country school I was at. And that continued, actually I continued on and was a leader of that club for 25 years or until I became very much involved in city government. I couldn't handle farm work and 4-H leader and many other things at the same time. So had to drop that one.
Yes, you were juggling many roles there, weren't you?
That's right.
You mentioned that your dad's family was from Sweden. I wonder if there were any traditions that were passed down from your parents that you remember or that you still keep up with.
You know, that's one thing that we did not see. Well, it could have been, you know, you can kind of look at it as a tradition. Is we always had, you know, Christmas Eve at our home with the extended family. That was a tradition that we did for years. Well, the last one we did when my mother was still living, and of course the family was so expanded that and there was so many of us that we finally ended up doing it in the church basement, because when you end up with 65, 70 people on a Christmas Eve, it's a little overwhelming. I remember I think the last time we had it here in our house, the Christmas Eve dinner, we had 7 kids basically on the floor that were, you know, toddlers, and 1 or 2, 3 years old. Well, it was a lot of fun, but there were just it wasn't room. There wasn't room for everybody. And not only that, but of course with bathroom facilities and all that kind of stuff, you're kind of limited too. So it was a busy place, but we didn't carry on any basic traditions, particularly of food that was Swedish known, and I don't think I don't I don't know is I never did hear of any of the relatives on my dad's side of the family really talk about any Swedish traditions. So I don't, which is interesting. But my oldest sister, her husband is Swedish, and they had several traditions, and so some of them kind of got included in some of our Christmas, and making that potato sausage or something, I think that's what you call it, is a Swedish thing, and they always made that at Christmas every year. We look forward to that at our Christmas Eve dinner, but of course that was brought in after she was married.
You've been mayor out there since when?
I was elected in 1989, 79. Excuse me, 79. So I started January 1st of 1980.
Would you say that there were lessons that your work has taught you?
Oh, I mean, everything is a learning experience for something else and so forth. Of course, that was becoming a mayor or anything else. That was the furthest from my radar of anything. I'd never thought about, entering the public arena as a school board member or a city council. And one of the reasons for that was because my dad had been on both the school board and the city council, we remember of him, especially when the Orono School District was organized, that he had so many meetings, and they lasted so late into the night that he was just dog tired and so forth from that. And with the local, well, it was township at that point in time, he kind of enjoyed it, but it was stressful as well. So that certainly wasn't an aspiration. And then of course I ended up being appointed without even being asked to run. It kind of put me in a spot where I had to say yes or no within minutes, and that kind of triggered another pursuit that has been exciting, interesting, and enjoyable as far as I'm concerned, because I haven't had I've had some rough times with certain councils that are stressful, but as a whole, it's just been an enjoyable experience working with the city council and staffs that we've had in the city of Independence.
Super. So were there people in the community who were influential for you?
Yes, I was trying to think about that, and of course, I mentioned earlier about Florence and Harold Carlson. From Mound, they ended up moving into, he left the church there, and then Harold became pastor of Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in St. Paul. But in the meantime, they ended up buying a cabin on North Arm. And of course, that way, being that was very close, our families spent a lot of time together yet at the cabin. And then of course in the church in St. Paul. But I think back to one of my probably one of my most influential persons was a neighbor lady that was my Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Ellen Hamilton. And there's still Hamilton family that are neighbors of ours. And then of course the 4-H leader that I mentioned, Mrs. Pearl Lindahl. I mean, she had 3 children of her own. A daughter that was older than, well, daughter and a son, both that were older than I was, and then a daughter younger than I was. But she was so good working with young people, and was close, and with the 4-H club was just a wonderful person to have as a mentor. And then I always enjoyed and had a great deal of respect for our teachers that we had in our one-room country school. I think we were fortunate to have well, my dad always said that we had the best of teachers in our school, and I think that had to do with the school board being quite selective and maybe where the location was. So my school teachers over the years, Florence Sutton, of course, being my first one, but I can name several of them. Melvina LaSalle was with us for I think two and a half years, and then Mrs. Phil Reimer, Gladys Reimer, and I think you got to meet her.
I did.
Was one of my teachers, and then a Miss Hanson was my 8th grade school teacher. So, you know, teaching in a one-room school with 35 kids, and it was 8 grades, but not always did we have a student in each grade. But they've got to influence you one way or another, and I think we had a very positive experience in our country school. We had good discipline and teachers that were very good in teaching. So I have to give them a lot of credit in what I am today for life, because when I started high school at Mound, you know, it was a very different learning environment that I didn't feel inferior at all in the educational programs and so forth that we had. So, and then of course I went 2 years to Mound, and then the Orono School was ready for us, and so I did my junior and senior year at the Orono High School.
Well, my last question for you might be, how would you like to be remembered?
I certainly don't want to be remembered for something crazy or outstanding. I guess if anything, just as somebody that had a good feeling for the community and did what was right for the community and the organizations that we're involved with. Fortunately or unfortunately, in the organizations that I belong to, it's not just it's not just focused on you know, my small community around me, but like I'm on a mutual insurance board, and that covers an area of about 15 counties. And when I work with the League of Minnesota Cities, that's of course all of the state. And then I've been involved with issues with the National League of Cities, and it was kind of the same way with the Federal Land Bank. I was not only involved locally, but statewide and then district-wide, and I was on a national committee for the land bank. So there's some of those things that you hope that your influence is left with a positive memory rather than a negative in working together with people, because you always have disagreements, but those disagreements can become very positive if you're working for the benefit of the student or whatever it is that is the main purpose of the organization. So I guess I'd hope to be remembered as a person who was easy to work with and got things done at the same time.
Super. My experience certainly has been true, Marvin.
Yes.
Well, and I'd like to thank you for sharing this family history with us, and we will archive it in our museum. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, it's been great, and it's fun always to visit with you and hear what's going on in your life too. So thank you.